In this episode of our live coding, we're going to finish up the trip service kata and try to improve its design now that it's under test. But I also have a hunch that that might not take the full hour. So I am preparing on the side very quickly another kata that's more advanced, where we'll get to apply the same principles that we just did, except on an iOS app. Hello and welcome. Hey, Mudshark and Garbob. And, oh, my buttons are actually working this time. I can actually see both of you are present. Stop! Good to have you. For those who are watching after the fact on, well, wherever you watch this, give it a like, give it a subscribe, a follow, whatever it takes. So that you get more of this, and you can always change your mind if you don't like it. All right. So, hey, what is up? Let's see. I don't think I have any grand announcements. Oh, I'm John Reed, a trainer and coach with Industrial Logic, where we help teams around the world build better software sooner, or something like that. Let's hope you two are well. We'll see if anyone joins. But this is where we were. Actually, let me step back a bit. We got this whole social trip service exercise under test. And we did that by doing excising these portions, or boxing them off into methods, and doing overrides, as you can see here. The nice notation that AppCode and the other JetBrains IDEs have for whether something is overrided and to go straight to it. Right? Very nice. Ah, AppCode. You make me cry. You're so good. I will miss you. Someday. But I'm not going to stop until I can. There's no other choice. So we boxed these problematic portions off. And an interesting thing about this subclass and override technique is it is great. This is from working effectively with legacy code. It is great for working with legacy code because it disturbs it as little as possible. Both of these things, the subclassing, the extract to method, and then overriding them, that's all sort of automated. Very easy, hard to get wrong, which is one of the things you need to tackle legacy code. Is you want to avoid disturbing the original code as much as possible. But the problem with it is that it avoids disturbing the original code as much as possible. The original code, hello, Tukes. Good to have you. We want to, if we don't change the original code, it's a win at first because we're scared to touch it. But once it's under test, you really want to change the design of the code to improve it. Now, one thing we already did last time was we went into, oh, now I know what this user is. Excuse me. I just learned this past week. Good to have you. Where in the world are you, Tukes? Yeah, a Swift stream. How about that? Last time this is friends with wasn't here on user. It was elsewhere, like within the trip service itself, I think. Yeah, it was all buried inside of here, and it was getting Too, like, the code smell is called feature envy, where Trip's service was getting too interested in what was inside of user when it's user's job basically to know stuff about itself. Now we pulled this out, but we didn't improve it. So that is, we did a move method. Algeria. You might have mentioned that before, but I'd forgotten it. Thank you. I'm out here in California in the USA. Great to have you. So we did a move method on this, but I just sort of moved it. But now I'm looking at it and going, it's kind of gross. There are things I want to change about it. Particularly now that it's all under test. And let me run it with coverage. And you can see we have no reds in here. That doesn't guarantee that the coverage is good, except I know that it had no tests, and everything we added very carefully. So I'm confident that we can work on it. Let's improve this. First, starting off with this is friends with user. It's really like, who's this user? We're talking to a user about somebody else. So it's really about, I want to do a rename and say, is friends with someone else, another user? That's already a little better, less confusing. I'm going to run tests, and if they pass, it commits. I'm using a technique called TCR, test and commit or revert. If it passes tests, it does a commit. If it doesn't pass tests, for example, if I break this, then this will revert because the tests fail, like that. So let's improve this some more. Is friends with another user. Let me change this signature. Oh, that's not it. It's this. This was ported over by somebody else from Java. And so I really want to say, make this the actual part of the name. You can see it. Here is friends with. So this is checking the user is friends with the logged in user. How do I like how this fits? Is friends with. Maybe I don't like that. This is where I get to change my mind. Let's reset. Is friends with logged in user. Okay, I like that better. Changing my mind. I initially went with a named parameter, but it's nice to go look at the point of call to see how does it read. What else can we clean up in here? This seems really really complicated, because this can just be, for example, return true, which means we don't need the break, which means this becomes return, I'll just inline this, return false, which means we don't need that variable. Every one of these is becoming a commit. See that here in the history. And even this, I think, can be simplified because it's just doing a search inside of the self get friends. Can we do self get friends contains another user? Like, what if I could just do that? Will this pass? And it does. All this code is disappearing. We can remove the return. We can remove the self dot. There. How's that? That was much better than what we had before. Let me get rid of these self dots here. Oh, thank you, Code Details, for the follow. Appreciate it. Tukes. Many people see the future of mobile surrounded by web technologies such as JavaScript, especially with the browser getting better each year. What do I think about it? What is my take about native? It's funny that you say that because the project I am currently working in for my day job is actually React Native. It is my first experience working in React Native. And there are things I've come to appreciate about it. In particular, the ability most of the time. Okay, so React Native, not a fan. Other things like it, probably not a great fan. Most of the time, it works better except when it doesn't. And I feel like for the time we have saved by having a common code base, and we have lost time in other ways where just writing it natively probably would have been faster than trying to maintain a single code base. Another thing that I appreciate about it, though, is that when it works, which sometimes it doesn't, you see a view and you do some styling on it, and you can immediately see, is this what I want? Let's add some spacing. Let's add some padding. Let's change the color. You can just do it and see it without rerunning the app. Except sometimes you do have to rerun the app. So it's not perfect. That reminds me of Swift UI previews, except the difference between that and Swift UI preview is that the preview is using fake data. The React Native thing, you're actually looking at the running app and changing it on the fly. Now, there's a technique for doing this in Swift as well. Krzysztof, I can't pronounce his last name, but there's a tool called Injection, which will let you do this for running iOS code to actually see the app. It suffers from the same problems that React Native does, where it works great except when it doesn't. So it's like, oh no, now I have to restart it because it sort of lost its mind. So there are things about it I appreciate and things I've learned. Mudshark's right. What's the answer? There is no the answer. You do whatever you need to at the moment. Those are just some of my thoughts. I've learned TypeScript. It's been fun to learn a new language. And I get to work in a real IDE. One that intrigues me is, maybe it intrigues me because I look forward with dread to the day when I lose app code, is I get to work in WebStorm, another JetBrains IDE, to do JavaScript. And doggone if a lot of the tooling is not better, some is not as good. It's kind of like working in iOS. In the end, I think technology matters less than people think it does, and techniques matter more. Why we're here. All right, we've done this. I've simplified this code. I have gotten rid of some redundant stuff, and this was a big win here. So let's go back to the trip service itself, right? We've got it, the thing that is boxed off here. What is this? This is doing trip. So this is the actual thing to get the trips for a particular user that gets passed in. Which means we can't. My initial naive thought was we should just be able to pass it in as an argument, but we can't. Actually, wait. No. I mean, we're passing in the user, but we don't want to go through all the work, I think, of finding the trips for the user, because you may not return those trips if the current user is not logged in. We only want to we want to defer the work. How do we do this? With closures. And closure, basically in the ability to inject closures is like it's another superpower, I think. It extends this technique of extracting a method and instead of using override, it's the act of let's make it a closure, and let's then it all becomes clearer once you see it. I think some of you already get what I'm saying. Hey, there are a few more folks here. Say hello in the chat if you haven't. Oh, doggone, is my hello button? Oh, there it is. Hey, my button works for the first time in months. So, what I want to do is take this. We already have this in a method. Trips 4. And I want to inject. How do we get the trips for a particular user? Or maybe this is a better one. How to get the current user. You know what? Let's start here. This one is a little easier to start with because the currently logged in user we can pass in. We don't have to defer this. We can do this up front. Let's do it. So, how to approach this? Essentially what I want to do, there's some funny formatting here. Let me just check in that formatting. Get trips by user. I'll just show you what I mean. So visible by current user. This is sort of what I imagine. Is instead of doing this, we push this out to the caller. Except we don't have to push it out to the caller. I'll show you what I mean. So let's make sure we're green. And I'm going to grab this portion here. And I'm going to introduce a new parameter. Or the default value. By default value, that this means it's a little unclear. It's here what they mean. This really means out at the call site, which isn't quite what we want. Shoot. Okay, never mind. Current user. Current user is going to be type user. And this will be actually, instead of doing it here, This is an app code shortcoming. I wish they would separate this. They would give me a way to specify the actual default that appears in the parameter list. But they don't. I know that affects the call sites. So what I will do is I will add me as a user. Uh-oh. Is this going to work with a try? I guess it's try bang. What's going on here? Okay. I copied this up here as the parameter. It's unused. Oh man, it got rid of it. Fatal error. Whoops. Fatal error because we can't do this from the test and the test failed. Try again. Let me do this more carefully. Let's come back here and say this is going to be visible by current user. And I'm not going to provide a default. I'm going to break the callers. Let's go to, I'll actually leave that there. Let's go to the users. Oh, we only have one user visible by the logged in user. Stop me if I apologize for going way off the mark here. Current user needs to be a optional. Okay, reset, try again. I've gone too far and too hard. Let's introduce an optional and we'll make it nil. Could I create a new method with a new signature as a stepping stone? How to get there in small steps. Maybe. Let me do this again. I'm going to, as a stepping stone, oops, I'm going to introduce something that's not going to be used. That's going to be a optional user and it's going to be nil at the call site. This will pass. Okay, now at the call sites, where normally we would pass this in, I'm going to say the call sites are all passing in nil, so they won't use this. But now, if we add in the trip service logged in user, that's this here. Okay, so here, this is going to be the logged in user. Doesn't like that? It does like that. This is also going to be the logged in user. Seems a little risky to make all these changes since this is not being used. But now, I think what I can do is this. Instead of calling the method, take the passed in. There we go. Take the passed in optional and use this if it is provided, which means this is no longer used. Let me go to the override and delete it and delete it. There we go. That took a bit of monkeying around. And it's hard to see with it scrolling off, so let me reformat it a bit there. There. Now I can get trips by user. Now let's go to where this is used. Oh, it's get trips by user visible by current user. Whoops. Let's do some renaming. First, let's make this current user. And change its name to be internal. It did some reformatting for me. So Tooks, my earlier comments about React Native were, excuse me, where's my mute? I lost my mute button. We're writing brand new React Native. So there, in my case, we were creating new code from scratch. So not the case where we already had existing code. I don't know. You know, there, like I said, those are my observations and my guesses, but every project is different. One reservation I have about shared stuff is that it seems to work really well when the views are simple. Any sort of React stuff, React Native stuff, seems to work well when the views are simple. But when the views are simple, the cost of creating native code is low. So I do think there is value in having a shared code base. And for that reason, I am thinking more about Kotlin multi-platform lately. I don't know if it's, I've never tried it. So, all right, how's this? It's showing red here, but ignore it. That's a ghost error. So visible by logged in user, visible by nil, user not logged in. There we go. So essentially, I've just taken this and I've pushed it up and say, pass this in. And if you don't pass in something, so a caller can say, get trips by user, and it will do this bit automatically for us of saying, well, go and get the logged in user. But it gives anybody the chance to override this and say, maybe not, maybe don't use that. Do I see a decrease in native developers? For example, in your country in Europe, you notice more demand for those cross-platform solutions. Hello! Thank you for the follow, Life Forteo. It's hard to say. Uh, Ultimately, I think platforms matter less than programming techniques. It comes back to that. I want to be able to do small steps, um, and not have the system fight me. There are ways that React Native fights me, that are different from the ways Native fights me. Always keep learning. All right, so we got rid of one, but we can't get rid of this one. That is, we can't pass it in. Well, we don't want to, because we don't want to call the trip service at the call site. We want it as a closure. Now, it's already a function, but we can't call a function. Here, let's try this. Let's do an extract closure. I don't know what to call it. As you can see, it's very much the same thing. Swift and JavaScript have pros and cons. Oh, Garbob, you've tried Kotlin multi-platform? Interesting. I may want to hear more about that. There's, wow. Wow. So maybe that's just like React Native type stuff where it's like, well, the setup is really hard and you pay a cost and there are no perfect solutions. So I did an extract to closure, which of course it's just doing the very same thing, but what's handy about this is this gives me the actual closure I want, and I can see the signature for it. Trip for user is a better name. I agree. But I'm also trying to get rid of trips for user. And thank you for your first chat. Hey. So you're obviously a Swift programmer since you aligned with naming style guidelines. Let's turn this into a closure. And I'm going to hold on to it up here. Let's say this is going to be let trips for, and this is going to be, and I can see from the signature here, something that takes a user and returns, it's gross, but it returns an optional array. I don't like that, but, and this is going to start out with looking like that by default. Nothing's using this, so I should be able to commit it. The green bar will disappear. Whoop, it doesn't pass. It doesn't work. Result of call. Oh, it failed to include a return statement. And failed. It did not work. Let me try again. Baby steps. I got slapped by TCR. That's a tough question, Tooks. Me, personally, I think native is just, it's closer, and I like to be closer to the action, to know what's going on, because ultimately all that stuff gets converted. And why not work why work at the abstraction above? What do you do when things go wrong? What do you do when your cross-platform solution, like a component, you need something that's native? Well, then you want to be able to write it in native. For me, learning, yeah, I know. That's forget assembly. We're gonna code bits, you. When I was a kid, a friend of mine, his dad had one of these ancient microcomputers where you didn't program an assembly. You flipped switches and hit enter. Yep. So that's even pre-assembly. Let's try this again. Work in baby steps. I'm going to try doing extract closure and call return on this. Okay. So that worked. And then, oh, I know why it failed. Because it was executed. Here, I'll show you. If I say trips 4 is going to be a closure that takes a user and returns optional trip, because I assigned this to something, it executed it right away, I think. Something like, no, I don't know why. So for now, I'm just going to return nil. Like nothing is calling this. That should be fine. Ooh, it doesn't like it. It doesn't like it. Let me try a different name, because I didn't think that would affect the tests. Once again. Doo -doo -doo. Right? Nothing is calling it. Okay. I think calling it by the same name happened to, like, it changed the meaning of this, and it was calling it directly in the tests, which is not what we want. Okay. This is a TCR technique. I got slapped by reverts a couple of times from failing tests. So the response is move in smaller steps. Go small. So I should be able to pump this in because nothing's using it. And turn this into a var. But now, here we go. Now, out at the test level, we don't want to call this. User trips. Testable trip service. Where I make it up here. Do I have apps on the App Store? I do. They're not very interesting. Unless you count American Express, which I don't work there anymore. Here, trip service. Essentially what I want is we create the testable trip service and then hang on a second. We'll return the user trips. Let me try something here. I should be able to take the trip service and say the trips for 2. Ooh, it didn't like that? Oh, it's hidden. Stop. Reset. Reset. Pull this up. Like that. Let me just do a reformat. Oh, reformatting. Is that something I've failed to do in general? If it is, this should have been the first thing I did. Oh, yes. Like all this. That should have been the first thing I did on legacy code, is just apply straight up reformatting, because what Swift programmer wants to see this? There, that's better. This we built ourselves for testing. Okay. We're getting there. So now it's out here at this level. Now I should be able to say the trips for, sorry, in the tests. Say, don't use that. Instead, I want you to take the user, the friend trips. Now this is not going to pass. Well, it will pass because it's not doing anything with it unless I need to make it compile first. There we go. Let me sprinkle this around. What are the friends here? User with no friends. Friend with no trips. Okay, now that we've got trips for 2, the question is, if I call trips for 2, here, will this pass? It does. So now this is unused. Ha ha. And we no longer have to override it. Let me come to the override, which means that this is meaningless. And we should be closer. This is now pointless to set the logged in user. So let me get rid of that. Yes. One more use. Also here. So this nil is now over here. And that means we can get rid of this, which means we can get rid of the override. So where we are making the testable trip service, I can now make an actual trip service. So this is no longer used. And we've improved the design of the code. You may say, how? And that is by making this explicitly injectable. Oop, trips for 2. Let's rename that. So trips Or it's sitting out here as a property, this closure. Do I want to keep it there, or do I want to pass it in to the constructor? Probably not at the constructor level, or the initializer. So how's this? How's this sitting with you? This is still not used by the tests, because it shouldn't be. This is not used by the tests because it is a default argument, but the test is saying, don't do that. Here's the current user, go. Does this make sense? So if I show you the coverage, you'll see, ooh, I thought this would be red. I think this is a coverage lie. I don't believe this. I don't believe it at all. Like, I'm pretty sure if I do a fatal error in here, yeah, that's a lie. Coverage can be a lie. Don't always believe it. So the shape of trip service has changed. We might pass in the current user, or rather, we are going to use this, except not if you specify a different way to get the current user. And we're going to use this closure, except not if you set it to something else. How's this? Friend trips. Yeah, that looks okay. There might be ways we could improve this, but there you have it. Now, when do I use this technique? You can't do overriding when you can't do subclassing. And when can't you do subclassing? Well, obviously, if it's not a class, you can't subclass it. So if it's a struct, I lean on this extract closure refactoring a lot. Another time when you can't do subclassing is if you're working in a view controller, but it's tied to a storyboard. Because a storyboard takes the instance of the view controller and serializes it. It freeze-dries it right into the storyboard itself. So you can't say, I want to use a subclass of this view controller. The storyboard's like, no, I don't know anything of what you're talking about. In fact, you can't even talk to the storyboard to tell it to use a subclass. It has the instance of the view controller. You have to use it. There's no choice. So that is another case when I would use this extraction to a closure. And then that gives callers the opportunity to say, here's the logic, here's the method to use to get the trips for the user. Well, I thought this would just be super easy, but it was a little more complicated. Let me give you a sneak peek into what I plan to do next time. So in my article on Swift Code Katas, we've been working through the legacy ones. I should reorder this and put them in the order that we did it. We did Gilded Rose first. That's a good one to start with. Trip Service is the one we're on now. Here's a good one. I've only done it once. The Baby Steps Timer. This is a functioning app that was not written to be testable. It's it's a view controller. It's got buttons. It's got a timer. And that is where we are going to play. I'll just show you what we have here. It's in this view controller. Ooh, here's a big messy view controller. It's doing a whole bunch of stuff. It's got a timer. It's got AV audio player to play sounds. How do we test this? That'll be next time. So, I guess we'll end a little early. That's all right. I don't know what code katas you like. Maybe there are other ones that I should include. That's why I thought of doing it first, and I thought, oh no, we should do this after we've done these other things, because the techniques we've used, especially around trip service, actually especially around extracting closures, are going to become important. I can't remember if there's a storyboard on this. I don't know. Oh, what am I waiting for from WWDC? I'm not. I'm always disappointed, so I've stopped hoping. Because everyone is all excited about Swift UI. There we go. Sorry about my bot there got a little excited. It's like, stop spamming emotes. Really? Maybe I should turn that off. I'm going to go in and figure out how to turn that off. You should be able to put in emoji, of course. There's going to be, great announcements about Swift UI and Swift, and that's all wonderful, but it still leaves me a little hollow, feeling a little sad if they haven't addressed testability. Now, testability for Swift UI is feasible with View Inspector, which is not from Apple. But so I just wish that folks would take micro-testing a little more seriously in the iOS community. They don't. That's the reality. I need to live in reality, not in my dream world. But that's part of why I'm here, is that to continue to champion. It's not a cause. It's like, I'm not fighting for unit tests as if there were intrinsic value in having something with unit tests. I'm doing it because it will make your life better. I write microtests because I need them, because of how I work. You see, the fast. How many commits did I do? Want to see how many commits I did? Let's have a look. These are the commits I did. They don't have descriptive messages. That's how I like to work. And normally, we do a commit and a push, like straight to trunk. That's also how I like to work. So there are ways of working that I think help me sleep better. They are more fun. They give me quick feedback, and the philosophy is bigger than a philosophy. It is, I think, a natural law that a complex system that is not working is very difficult to get working, whereas a complex system that is working is easy to keep working. And so that's staying green, right? Everything, fast feedback from the tests, the ability, for example, to check Swift UI and say, okay, if this comes in the input, I expect this text to be showing somewhere in the Swift UI. I don't care where, but it better match the input, or like an array of 2 things. Well, then I better see two items in this list. We can do those things with View Inspector, or tap the button. Find the button wherever it is and tap it, and then it should have effects, right? These are the kinds of things that help me, and that I think can help iOS developers all around the world, and lead you to live a more joyful life, a more relaxed life, and have more fun, and get more stuff done, and ship. Okay, that's all we got. Next week I will be off. I'm going to a high school reunion, which will be fun. It's not at my high school, that's too far away, but it's a gathering of people. So I'll be off next week. I'll be back in 2 weeks to tackle the new legacy code problem of dealing with that app. Thank you very much for watching. If you've watching on whatever you're watching on, give it a like, give it a follow, give it a thumbs up, give it a subscribe, whatever it takes. And I will see you then. Let's see, where's my buttons here? I'll see you in 2 weeks. All right, take care.